Okay. Dear colleagues, dear friends, welcome back. Let's continue the session 1. In this series, we will be focusing on the science and cultural diplomacy and the international cooperation and the governance. And we will have the 4 speakers to give us their brilliant ideas. And the first speaker is Geir Helgesen, the director of the Nordic Institute of Asian Studies from the University of Copenhagen. Okay, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, as all the other speakers and guests. It's a great conference and it's a great topic. I have no beautiful pictures or text, so you can look at the poster. This session is dealing with politics and governance of relevance to the Arctic and to our cooperation. My brief input will be dealing with international relations between China and East Asia on the one side and the Nordic region on the other, with a special focus on the impact of culture. I will point at a general problem and suggest a possible remedy. The Arctic is attracting new stakeholders. To prepare for a peaceful cooperation between actors from different parts of the world to the benefit of the local people, as well as to companies and nations engaged in this development, there is a host of experiences from the field of international relations one can learn from. The experiences I'm hinting at are from international business relations in particular, but increasingly also from international politics. The almost universal mistake in this kind of international and intercultural interaction has been that the Western-based companies and foreign affairs actors alike have assumed that there is one way in international relations, our way. Now, as the hegemony of the West is fading, and we are approaching what has been called the Asian century, hopefully an era with more equal international relations, relieved from the stalemate of opposing political ideologies of the past, will come. But this positive new situation should not make us forget that East and West still exist as separate entities. Unfortunately, it is rather common to neglect differences, pretend that they are minor and insignificant compared to all the similarities that bind us together as human beings. This is a widespread and well-meaning attitude, not least in our part of the world. But such an attitude is absolutely not recommended. Solid results in several disciplines in the social sciences and in the humanities clearly document that we are cultural products, all of us. This is not the only important characteristic of the human race, but in the field of international relations, cultural traits are among the more important ones, and its importance increases and becomes dangerous if the issue is neglected. Today we know that culture is not only external to the human nature, it is biologically internalized, and as such it affects the way our brain works, how the brain is formatting cognition and producing different mental results from the same external experience. Different ideas of governance and politics, of might and right, of political culture and cross-cultural communication are not only a matter of ideological differences. It is much more basic and forceful. The existing fundamental cultural differences between East and West make it unwise to expect smooth and easy communication between representatives from these different cultures. Cultural differences are present in the Nordic region as well. Historically, they were strengthened by local conflicts and major wars. Currently, they are tamed by international arrangements, different form of popular and intergovernmental cooperation, and by a general consensus among people in the region to perceive each other as an extended family of nations. This is a strong norm permitting differences, and in the case of Denmark and Sweden, for instance, even quarrels, but not letting disagreements overshadow agreements, bearing in mind the advantages our close relations bestow upon us. Now to our Chinese-Nordic Arctic research cooperation. We, the Nordic partners, represent the region. Our Chinese partners represent a country, a big and populous country, a great power, yes, but still one country. The Nordic region, with its 25 million people, about the same number as is living in Shanghai region, are the minor partner in this relationship. But we have a lot to offer. And among our great achievements are the regional Nordic cooperation. A borderless region with a common labor market, educational market, and not least with a general positive approach towards each other, not only on the elite level, but among people in general. The good news is that we do not have to export this great idea about regional cooperation to China and East Asia. China, Korea, and Japan have already established their Trilateral Cooperation Committee, the TCC, with a secretariat in Seoul, Korea, staffed with people from all three countries and headed by a Secretary General, very similar to our Nordic Council of Ministers located in Copenhagen. I bring this up in order to point at the possible enlargement of this consortium. If research institutions in Korea and Japan were invited in, we would be an entity of cross-regional cooperation. This issue has already been discussed in the TCC, why an invitation from our forum might be a welcome push for our colleagues in Korea and Japan. If you ask, why not also invite Singapore and India and others? The other Asian countries that entered the Arctic Council as permanent observers recently. The answer is that they are not partners of the East Asian Regional Cooperation. The suggestion is to establish cooperation between two regional bodies with a similar organizational pattern and a similar agenda to promote relations between the member countries and develop relations with similar regional bodies globally. Why this suggestion? And what would the advantage be? Given that cultures differ, as does national interests, a cross-regional cooperative body might, in times of disagreement, form a strong balancing power. It might even become a forum where differences could be debated and dealt with before they develop into open disagreements and conflicting positions on serious issues. But why talk about disagreements at this stage? The impact of media coverage informing public opinion and affecting political decisions cannot be overestimated. It is an uncontrollable force, not affected by official statements from any government. And media are often more interested in exciting stories and big headlines than in conveying neutral information and true stories. As you know, Chinese companies might be interested in the iron deposits found not far from Nuuk in Greenland. A UK-based company has been investigating the deposits, but everyone seems to know that if opened, the mine will depend on Chinese capital and maybe mainly a Chinese workforce. This has been one of the big stories in Danish news media lately. The reports and speculations have not been overly positive. In short, one could say that the idea of the yellow peril has been reintroduced in the media. This in turn has added to existing differences of opinion between the Greenlandic and the Danish government. In Greenland, people ask, how come that Denmark can have such a warm and close relationship with China, sending its queen and a business elite to the Middle Kingdom, but be so hesitant when it comes to business relations between China and Greenland? Of course, this is a caricature of the story, as all short versions are, but it depicts a situation where an East Asian Nordic consortium might have an opportunity to interfere, bring in some balanced views from East Asian and Nordic perspectives with insights from the natural sciences as well as from the social sciences and the humanities. An interregional and interdisciplinary academic consortium focusing on the Arctic would be a resource bank with a convincing authority, and at the same time a conflict buffer. At NIAS, the Nordic Institute of Asian Studies, our mandate is to produce added Nordic value. If this interregional, interdisciplinary consortium could be realized, I believe that we could produce nothing less than added global value. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geir. You saved us 5 minutes. Good. Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Our second speaker is Dr. Hongyuan. He's from the Shanghai Institute for the International Studies. He serves as the Deputy Director of the International Organization and International Law of the Industry Institute. Oh, please.
Thanks so much. It's my great pleasure and honor to be here and make a presentation on science community and Arctic governance. Okay. And this is also work with Professor Yang Jian. And also, when we talk about science and governance, or the science role in international affairs, maybe we can to remember that Einstein's contribution to the global governance. He tried to abort or eliminate the national sovereignty states and try to build a global governance or universal government to replace the national sovereignty states to build the permanent peace and prosperity for humankind. And also we should remember the theme, Prophet says to try to use the systematical theory and to make the Manhattan project for the humankind to join the automatic age. And also when we talk about these questions about science and global issues of the Arctic, we will to try to think of the geoengineering, because there are several scientists to try to make some crazy experiments on Earth or on Arctic to use some new technology to change the Earth's landscape or change the Arctic. And so what's the role and how it's to play the factions to the global governance, and particularly Arctic, we will try to explore it from four aspects. The first is about the theoretical perspective. When we talk about what can scientists or scientist community can do in the global governance, particularly Arctic governance, we should to find that there may be four very important roles for scientist community. One is vision building, and we should have the common vision like Arctic governance, Arctic change, climate change, or environment protection. Then we can to try to integrate the different knowledge from all over the world, like IPCC report and climate change negotiation, like the Arctic Council's working group report and some Arctic legally binding commitments and legally binding actions. And when we make the knowledge, common knowledge, we can push our knowledge, make our knowledge into action, and make the common implementation. And after that, we can to try to learn from the past, learn from our experience from the Arctic governance and global governance. And particularly, this is an example for Chinese future Earth plans. We use the three core for scientists and policymaking: co-design, co-production, and co-research. And because there are so many interconnections in current governance issues, from food, water, to Arctic, to global climate change, we need the co-design, co-research, and co-production for us to achieve our common visions. Without common visions, we cannot make any concrete project, concrete achievement, concrete policy implementation in any issue areas. And also, I can give us example for different value, same issue and different value, because I have make a survey between Chinese and U.S. think tanks on the priority list of climate change security issues, priority list. We found that so we have same issues like climate change will cause some security issues or on humankind. But for Chinese and the United States, scientists have different priority lists on what climate change will cause this direct and indirect impacts on humankind. For Chinese side, we pay more attention to resource, food, water, and some basic need in the humankind. For U.S. scientists said they care more about global governance issues and human rights issues. And for contingency and for the average means for climate change priority list, for this survey, we have made for 2 years survey in China and U.S. We found that there are so many differences for this same issue, climate change. And then we can, when we talk about climate change negotiation, we found that so we have more than 20 or 30 years negotiations since the late 1980s, but we actually have no very concrete progress, just because we have the different values among different countries on the same issue, same climate change issue. So scientists from different countries should to try to integrate the common vision and make the common knowledge, because with the same value on same issue like Arctic governance, we can make our knowledge into action. We can to create or provide the common implementation to common public goods to all the every corner in the world. So it's very important for us to know the role of the scientist in the vision building, common knowledge building, and the common policy implication buildings of science community. particularly we should see that for governance, particularly for Arctic governance and global governance, this is polycentric issues. This not only top down but also bottom up. Not only the regional governance but also the national policy coordination and global governance issues. The scientists should try to do many things, many works in different stages. We should try to influence the mass media, to influence the public, to win the support of public on some issues from Arctic to environmental protections. We should build some policy support coordinations with the government, intergovernmental organizations. We should to try to use our knowledge to influence the intergovernmental negotiations, and we should use our knowledge to evaluate the common implementation in some regional cooperation issues. So from this perspective, our scientists, our researchers from different areas should to work together to do the evaluation, to make the regime creation, or to try to influence the public opinions. So scientist community is the key to the success of the regional and the global governance. Scientists will continue to be the catalytic and the very important key to make the knowledge into action. And so I have made quite some surveys and the field work on the scientists who join the Arctic Working Group work, and to join the IPY and the International Arctic Science Community. After these surveys, questionnaires, we have several basic findings. The first is about the scientist. Scientist is key for agenda setting and common vision, common knowledge formation. It's without the science community, without the scientists, we cannot to make the agenda setting in Arctic Council. And also we found that for different groups, for different issue areas, scientists will play a different roles, and they have two channels to play the influence in policy making, policy coordination, and policy evaluation for Arctic governance. First is Arctic Council's working group expert committee, and to try to use this channel to influence the Arctic Council's middle levels policy making, and particularly with many scientists and science community have got the authority from the domestic ministry or from the Arctic Council's mineral levels committee. By getting such kind of authority, the scientists, scientific community can make a much more influential role in some issues like sustainable development, fishery, and sea route research. And secondly, we have very important body like International Arctic Science Community, and I see it's not only the observers in Arctic Council, but also play a very important role, just like the IPCC to climate change negotiations. The IASC also play a IPCC's role in Arctic Council's agenda setting and the policy issue scanning and policy making and evaluation. And we have made more than 200 questionnaires and on different on Chinese and international scientists for their respondents toward policy making, and Arctic science will maybe give us some clear picture for scientists and Arctic Council. And first, because the blue color represents the Chinese scientists, and the red one for the international. We found actually there are so many similarities between Chinese and international scientists. For the nexus between Arctic governance, because time is limited, I will quickly slide to pass through these slides. And for this similarity, including the nexus between the Arctic governance and the scientist community but there's only some very little difference between Chinese and international side. Particularly, it's for the role the science community should play in the Arctic governance. For Chinese side, pay more attention to science research and the policy support. But for international side, the international scientists to pay more attention to governance tools and pay more attention to agent setting. And for other questions, we found there are so many. We think that mostly are very similar between Chinese side and international side. So, and for Chinese own scientists, he also have very positive respondents to Chinese scientists and Arctic governance, like the China to be the former observer in Arctic Council, and for which what are the influence for China should be, and maybe the number one, the science and research, and the number two is promote China's international reputation and try to make some energy and resource cooperation. And also Chinese Arctic science is very important to their respondents. They are very important for Chinese policy making, and also for Chinese the role is most for number one should be many people think it should be maintain Chinese national interests and in Arctic region, and also they also to try to some people also to select the keep the science independence as options. And also we found many people to take the polar climate change and the environmental protection as the top priorities for our science cooperation in these regions. And also many people also to pay more attention to like sea routes and geological explorations as their respondents. And so that's for very simple because our research, our service still is going on. Now this is very simple conclusion for China side and international side for science and Arctic governments. Maybe for Chinese side, we always inside out. We try to study our Chinese national interests and then to use this to use our knowledge to serve our national interests and try to make the knowledge into action. And for the international scientists, they try to pay more attention to global governance and use the global scientific findings to influence national policy coordination. And for Chinese side, they focus on the top-down structure. And for international side, it's bottom-up. We have more different voices for international of like US and EU scientists tend to have more different voices. And for China side, pay more attention to science research as our top priority. For the international side, it's governance centric, and we pay more for Chinese. We stressing the sharing interests among different countries between developed and developing countries. For international side, it's to attach more importance for sharing responsibilities in Arctic governance and in climate change. So actually we have similarities and have difference on science and Arctic governance. We should to integrate, just like in the first slide we told that for scientists and for global scientists, we should integrate a common vision and make common vision into the common knowledge and common policy implementation. So, but in some area like climate change, this is a case of same issue but different value issues. For active governance or Arctic issues, we should make it as a same issue, same value, or same issue, same knowledge, same vision. So we should maybe, because many Eastern countries just join the Arctic governance, like Professor Geir Helgesen mentioned in the morning's keynote. He like to integrate the West and East, integrate the Eastern culture and Western culture, because traditionally we use the control investment to solve the Arctic issues, global climate change issues, but we found we cannot solve this problem. Just use the money, use the technology, use the investment, and the control. We should try to use culture, because many issues, many obstacles faced by the global governments are caused by the same issue, different value. We should integrate we should narrow down the gap, the understanding gap between West and East, between developing country and developed country. And maybe my very simple suggestions is to try to bring some Eastern culture or Asian cultures to try to find a balance in our own soul, to try to unite the East-West in active governance, to try to use the unit of the heaven and earth, the 天人合一, to protect the environment and doing the resource development, and to try to unite the common vision and common knowledge, and to try to work together to make knowledge into same action, to try to create the common implementation, common public goods for every corner of humankind. Thank you. This is all.
Thank you, Dr. Yu Hongyuan, for the analysis on the science's role on the governance and the Arctic governance. Our third speaker is Rasmus Bertelsen.
The middle name.
It's postdoc, and he's from the Aalborg University. Okay, welcome.
Do we have 15 minutes?
Yeah, it's in 15 minutes. And we hope too you can take no more 15 minutes. Okay. When the time is reached, I will remind you 2 time left. 2 minutes left.
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to be here. I could not attend last year's symposium in Shanghai, but I must say I'm extremely pleased and impressed with what I'm seeing here at this symposium, and I hope to be able to participate in the future. Geir, in his talk about how people in Denmark look at the Chinese interest in Greenland, reminded me of a newspaper illustration, a newspaper caricature drawing, which I just wanted to share with you, because it illustrates beautifully what Geir was talking about. So a couple of years ago, the Danish Prime Minister was on an official visit to Greenland, and the Danish Prime Minister is a very elegant lady. And the drawing shows her stepping into the airplane on her way back, and there's a crowd waving at her, and this crowd looks East Asian or Inuit. And the Prime Minister turns to her aide next to her and says, and this is a very, very bad drawing in many, many ways. She turns to her aide and says, "Oh, aren't they cute, the little Eskimos?" And the aide answers her, "Madam Prime Minister, they are not Eskimos, they are Chinese." So, what I want to talk about today is two things. I will mention some research we are doing in my university, which is what is in the program, but I also want to talk about the broader framework for this research. And that is an initiative we are starting at Aalborg University, where we have the cooperation, the partnership of a number of people around the Nordic countries and Asia. Some of you here in this room have most kindly accepted to help us in this endeavor, and I want to talk about this initiative, and it is very much an invitation to all of you to join us in this conversation if you're interested. And the title so far of this initiative we're working on is the Arctic Nexus and Asian-Nordic Plus Relations. And that is because we are interested in how the Arctic connects Asian and Nordic countries and also the other Arctic countries, Canada, Russia, and the United States. That's the plus. So, I want to talk about the general framework for what we are doing, for what we are interested in. And that framework is very much the Nordic small states facing globalization. Then I will talk about how this global attention to the Arctic has developed. And that is the framework for saying a few words about this ongoing research, which I also want to mention. I don't want to spend too much time on it here because many of the things we are working on has already been mentioned, but maybe I can make some additions to what we have talked about. And then I will outline this initiative we have at Aalborg University, and again, this is very much meant as an invitation to those of you who could be interested. So, what is the setting? The setting is the Nordic small states as Arctic states facing globalization. Geir mentioned very well how much the Nordic states have in common and how well they collaborate. And of course, what the Nordic states have in common is that they are all small or very small states in the international system. They are liberal democratic, they are social democratic welfare states. And then we also have 3 self-governing communities in the Nordic countries, the Faroe Islands, Greenland, and the Åland Islands. And they could be characterized as microstates, very small, very, very small entities. And what is of course very relevant in this context here is that the Nordic countries are all Arctic countries. And I would claim that being an Arctic country is an important part of their history, their politics, their economy, their identity, and their foreign and security policy. So these Nordic countries are facing globalization, and by globalization I basically mean the economic and political rise of non-Western powers, which is very much what I'm going to say will center on. I'm very annoyed by that menu that keeps popping up. But of course, this shift in political and economic power in the world means very much that power and wealth is shifting away from the traditional foreign and security framework of the Nordic states. That framework has been transatlantic and European, and now power and wealth are shifting away from our traditional allies, alliances, and partnerships. And even though we may not be aware of it back in the Nordic countries, or we may not acknowledge it, there is a very acute competition for access. I'm a Mac person myself, and I must say I'm not getting more impressed by windows looking at that menu. Anyway, so there's an acute competition for attention and access in these new power centers, and that raises the question which we are basically interested in our research program, and that is the small Nordic states as Arctic states. Does the Arctic and the Arctic nexus, can that give the Nordic states a privileged political, scientific, economic, and transnational access in these new centers of wealth and power? So, globalization very quickly. I think what is characterizing the Arctic today, and also, of course, why we are here together today, is the global, and that means the Asian attention to the Arctic. It's the globalizing Arctic. It's the Arctic and globalization. And it's two things. It's environmental globalization and it's political economic globalization. And the environmental globalization is, of course, climate change, which I won't say more about because we have talked extensively about that. And then it is the political economic globalization, and that is, of course, the economic rise of emerging markets and the rising political power that comes with this economic rise. And here I've chosen a picture of the snow dragon to illustrate this rise of China and how that rise of China is manifested in Arctic research. So very quickly to the narrow research of Professor Li Xing, myself, and a graduate student, Mette Højriis-Gregersen, which is centered on the Chinese dream and Arctic science diplomacy. And again, I mean, the framework, and I think it's very important when we talk about Arctic research that we remember the big questions, that we remember to anchor our research in fundamental theoretical questions. And here, the big question is, of course, the rise and accommodation of the rise of accommodation of a rising China in the international system. And there are so many aspects to the rise of China and how China is accommodated. But I believe that the Arctic is one suitable region to look at this process. Chinese leaders have chosen mottos which have had a big influence on Chinese policy thinking, on China's relations with the outside world. For example, peaceful rise, peaceful development. And of course, the current leader has coined the term the Chinese dream. And we are at Aalborg University very interested in the concept of the Chinese dream because we think it will play a central role in Chinese policy and Chinese foreign relations for years to come. And the Chinese dream, well, there's an outside aspect, outside glory or power, and there's an inside aspect, individual prosperity. And what does the Chinese dream look like in the Arctic? Well, we believe it is a question of access, participation, and recognition as a stakeholder in the Arctic. And there we are interested in the role of soft power and science diplomacy for realizing these ambitions. And I think it has been demonstrated very clearly throughout our meeting. And for instance, yesterday evening when we went to Kaurholt for the groundbreaking for the Chow, that China is using science diplomacy to access the Arctic, to create legitimacy, and to build relations with Arctic states. But on the other hand, from the other side, we also believe that the Arctic states are using science and are using science diplomacy to accommodate a rising China. So, yeah, economic globalization, enough has been said about that. It's of course about energy for Asian rising economies that demand more and more energy and raw materials. It's the shipping routes. And then my personal pet interest which I always bring up because I don't think it gets enough attention, and that's the digital Arctic, because there are not only not only new sea lanes for bulk carriers. The northern sea routes are also the shortest routes for digital information, and this is a prospective fiber optic project, Arctic Fiber, between Japan and Britain through the Northwest Passage. And as you can see, it will connect high northern communities, and that will of course bring a lot of benefits to these communities. So, I'll use my last 3 minutes to say a few words about this initiative we have at Aalborg University. And the topic of our research is the role of the Arctic in relations of especially the Nordic countries, but also Canada, Russia, and the United States, with China, India, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea. And we have gotten some Danish money for this project, Danish money which will make it possible for us to invite some of our Chinese participants here today to Aalborg in November. We are applying. We have gotten some Nordic money to apply to invite Nordic speakers. Our core partners in our Nordic applications are the University of Lapland and the Fridtjof Nansen Institute, whose support we of course appreciate very much. We have partners in all the Nordic countries, all the self-governing communities, and the Sami, who also present here today. We have partners in China, India, Japan, and South Korea, and are working on Singapore, and also in Canada, Russia, and the United States. I grade them out because the focus here is on the Nordic. And we have 4 research themes: the geopolitics, the science diplomacy, the economics, and the indigenous people. And what we plan to do, we have already had a couple of sessions. Some of you were in these sessions at the International Congress of Arctic Social Sciences in Prince George, British Columbia, last week and the week before. We hope to have a couple of sessions at the ISA annual convention in February next year. And then of course we have our workshop in Aalborg in November this autumn. We hope to have a couple of sessions at the International Studies Association convention next February, in Rovaniemi next spring, at the Arctic Science Summit Week in Toyama, and in Oslo next autumn. And we are also developing partnerships with both business, civil society, and politics. I won't have time to go through the more detailed questions, but the geopolitical theme is Arctic states, Asian states, and Arctic international governance and security. The science diplomacy and climate change, new actors' interest in transnational science relations. I think Dr. Yu explained very well the importance of science diplomacy. And the economic... I see the chair is more generous than my own timer, so now I can take it more relaxed. Be more relaxed. Yes, the economics part, and finally the transnational indigenous relationships, which I personally think are extremely interesting, and I think they will be. And I think transnational indigenous relationships and questions of indigenous rights will be a very, very interesting topic in the Asian-Nordic relationship and the broader Arctic-Asian relationship. So, I'll finish by using this picture which Anders has given me permission to use. You will recognize in it. I think it's a great illustration of the kind of conversations we often have in the High North. And it's the kind of conversation which we in Aalborg with our partners hope to facilitate about the Arctic nexus and Asian-Nordic plus relations. And I hope very much that you will join us in this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rasmus, for a wonderful presentation. And our last speaker of this session is Director Magnús Björnsson from the Northern Lies of Confucius Institute, and is the University of Iceland. Please.
Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here with you and give some introduction about our institute, the Northern Lights Confucius Institute in Iceland, which has this beautiful name, and we've been working for several years, and I think we have a very good experience of cooperation with China, which I would like to share with you today. But when I was preparing, I noticed that I was the last one of the two sessions in the afternoon. So facing a rather, maybe a little bit tired audience. So I decided that I will show you, in introducing our institute, I will show you a part of a documentary we made recently. So that's maybe easier to digest than some PowerPoint made by myself. First, I want to mention, I don't know if you have any clue about what Confucius Institute is, but we are it's a network of more than or around 450 such institutes all around the world. And as you can, from the number, you can figure out that there are more than, in quite many countries, there are more than one, and actually quite many in some countries. But here in Iceland, we have only one, and that's the one I'm director for. And we are mostly facing or dealing with culture, and I think Professor Geir mentioned very correctly that culture is very, very important thing here when we're talking about this relation between so different worlds, and that's our main task. I will just say this for now, and you will see around 10 minutes of this documentary, and then you can have some clue about what we are doing in our daily lives. And then afterwards, I will come up with a few issues about what kind of things we can do to promote cultural exchange between Iceland or Nordic countries and China in particular. So I will first show you a little bit of this. Let's see. Okay.
Confucius-stofnunin Norturljós á Íslandi hóf starfsemi árið 2008. Hún var stofnuð í samstarfi Háskóla Íslands, Ningbo-háskóla og Hanban höfuðstöðva Confucius-stofnana í Peking. Stofnunin hefur vaxið og dafnað í þessu fámenna og fagra landi og tekst nú á við margs konar verkefni. Stofnunin hefur aðsetur í Háskóla Íslands og starfsemin fer að mestu fram við þennan elsta og virtasta háskóla landsins.
Samstarfi við Hanban og Ningbo hefur verið mjög gjöfult, og við erum auðvitað mjög þakklátt og mikil heiður fyrir okkur að hafa Confucius-stofnun innan vébanda Háskóla Íslands, og það er auðvitað ómetanlegt að hafa fengið kennara hingað gegnum Hanban. Það var reynst ákaflega vel og mikilvægt varðandi kennslu. Ningbo er mjög dýrmætur samstarfsaðili, og þangað hafa nemendur farið frá okkur eftir að hafa lært hér, og það er auðvitað mjög ákjósanlegt að nemendur hafi tækifæri til að fara og læra tungumálið í landinu og fá tilfinningu fyrir menningunni frá fyrstu hendi. Það skiptir mjög miklu máli.
Confucius-stofnun Norturljós samstarfsverkefni Háskóla Íslands, Ningbo-háskóla og Hanban, og við erum mjög ánægð með hvernig það samstarfið gengið. Hanban hefur náttúrulega frá upphafi stutt okkur mjög vel og rækilega, og þökkum við sannlega fyrir allir hans stuðning. Ningbo-háskóli hefur Við erum sérstaklega ánægð með það hvað við höfum fengið góða og hæfa kennara frá Nýmboháskóla. Það náttúrulega grunnur okkar starfi, byggist á. Og síðan erum við einstaklega ánægð með samstarf okkar við Háskóla Íslands. Háskólinn hefur stutt okkur að fremstamegni og við höfum aldrei notið hana sem velvilja í okkar garð hvaða sem úr háskólanum. Þannig að það ómetanlegur stuðningur.
Já, Confusius-stofnunin hefur að segja á tvíþætt hlutverk megindráttum. Hún hluti af kínversku náminu hjá okkur, hún styður við það og það alveg ljóst að við gætum ekki boðið upp þetta nám í kínversku fræðum ef það ekki væri fyrir tilstilli stofnunarinnar og fáum hingað kennara þeirra vegum en hins jafnframt menningarstofnun sem snýr út á við í samfélagið og mér finnst það mjög ánægjulegt að hún skuli eiga heimili sitt í okkur og þjóna öðrum hérna. Það í samræmi við mína hugsun háskólann sem stofnun sem þjóna öðrum samfélaginu.
Kennsla í kínverskum fræðum við Háskóla Íslands hefur lengst af verið eitt af megin viðfangsefnum stofnunarinnar.
Kínversk fræði hafa verið kennd við Háskóla Íslands núna síðan 2007. Þau byggja sjálfsögðu mjög mikið á tungumálakennslu eðlilega vegna þess að allflestir nemendur sem koma inn í þau fræði hafa engan bakgrunn í kínversku. Þar af leiðandi er mikilvægt að leggja gríðarlega áherslu á stíft tungumálnám svo að nemendur nái tiltölulega góðum tökum á málinu á stuttum tíma. En jafnframt lögð gríðarleg áherslu á það að við fáum góðan fræðilegan bakgrunn á ýmsum sviðum, menningar og samfélags og þess vegna hefur kennt reglulega námskeið í kínverskri sögu. Samtíðarmenningu þá sérstaklega farið yfir þær miklu breytingar sem Kína hefur tekið í gegnum á undanförnum 30-40 árum. En að auki ýmis valnámskeið í kínverskum stjórnmálum, efnahagsmálum, heimspeki, trúarbrögðum, kvikmyndum, bókmenntum og svo framvegis. Og að öllu er gert ráð fyrir því að nemendur taki síðan 3. árið í Kína, taki þá heilt ár í mjög stífu kínverskunámi og allflestir eftir slíkt nám eru komnir með tiltölulega góð tök bæði á kínversku og hafa nokkuð góða fræðilega þekkingu á kínverskri menningu og samfélagsmynstur.
Confusius-stofnunin hefur núna verið starfrækt í nokkur ár og við erum komin með ákveðin grunn og sem við getum byggt á. Mínar hugmyndir varðandi framtíðina svo að stofnunin muni fara meira í samfélagi, bjóða bæði upp á kennslu í kínversku og kínverska menningu allt samfélagi. Þannig að stofnunin verður bara þekkt allt samfélagi sem stofnun sem í þessu hlutverki.
经过过去几年的发展，冰岛北极光公司学院应该说取得长足的进展。应该说，在过去几年当中，呈现了以下的几个特点。第一个特点呢，就是它的规模是越来越大。从最初的7个人到现在，我们的培训的学生，包括专业学生，已经达到了300左右。第二个特点就是冰岛孔子学院的办学层次也在不断的丰富。从过去只有大学的教学，到现在就是技术教育学院、中学还有国际小学，我们在各个层面上都展开了汉语的教学。第3个特点呢，就是冰岛孔子学院的这个影响力日渐扩大。在这个中国大使馆，还有就是华人协会，还有是中冰友好协会等单位的帮助下，我们的影响力呢在逐步的扩大。我们现在举办的大型活动，越来越多的冰岛人都特别喜欢参加。
Kínverskunni kemur heill heimur, menningarheimur sem teygir sig langt aftur í aldir og býr yfir ýmsum verðmætum. Jafnframt fáum við aðgang að samtímanum í Kína og aukinn skilning á því sem að gerast á þessari fjölmennu þjóð sem að allir eru sammála í eftir að leika stórt hlutverk á veraldarsviðinu. En það mikilvægt að vita þennan heim, eiga fólk sem hefur hefur greiðan aðgang á hann.
Utan hefðbundið nám í kínverskum fræðum sem stofnunin stendur að var námskeið í viðskipta kínversku nýverið sett á fót. Þessari nýju námskeið hefur verið mjög vel tekið og hefur fjöldi nemenda valið námið.
Ég tel að nám í viðskipta kínversku sé mjög gagnlegt fyrir þá sem það stundar. Kína í dag næststærsta hagkerfi heimsins og ég spái því að innan 20 ára verður Kína stærsta hagkerfi heimsins og það alveg sérstaklega verðmætt fyrir Íslending að kunna kínversku, þekkja til viðskiptafræða, hafa búið í Kína sem námsmaður. Þetta fólk mun eiga auðvelt með að fá vinnu hvar sem í heiminum því að það mikill áhugi allan heim á viðskiptum við Kína í dag og ég veit að þá sá áhugi eftir að aukast í framtíðinni.
Ég hef alltaf haft mikinn áhuga á kínversku, bæði þá táknunum því að mér fannst það alltaf rosalega falleg og heillið mitt, en svo var líka þessi langa menningarsaga sem Kína að búa að, sem fannst mjög spennandi og skemmtilega. Í tímum töluðu kínversku og þess vegna fengið mjög mikið að mæta þessi tímana vegna þess að það var þjálfun, tungumálinu, en einn af þessum gaman yfir annað það að það svo mikið í gangi og til dæmis, við ofta hittum þá kínversku skiptinana sem eru líka og komum kínast heim, svo erum núna bara til Ningbo í maí og sjálfsög á síðust árinu byrjum við búið til Kína og verðum það í ár, svo það kýtlar mikið að fara þangað.
Já, dóttir mín 19 ára hefur verið mjög áhugasöm að læra kínversku og hefur verið í tím til að læra og hún fór í sumarskóla við Peking-háskóla síðastliðið sumar og fannst þá stórkostleg upplifun og hún mjög áhugasöm að læra kínversku áfram hér í háskólanum.
Þrátt fyrir að kennsla í kínversku sé mjög mikilvægur hluti af starfseminni gerir stofnunin fjölmargt annað. Þar má helst nefna skipulagningu ýmissa viðburða jafnt innan sem utan veggja Háskóla Íslands.
Fyrir utan kínverskuna þá stendur stofnunin fyrir ýmsum viðburðum eins og kvikmyndasýningum, hátíðum og fyrirlestrum.
Hvað hátíðir var það? Það helst að nefna kínversku nýjárshátíðina sem haldin í Háskóla Íslands á hverju ári. Þá erum við að halda upp á kínverska nýjárið sem ekki alveg á sama tíma og við erum þau. Það sem sagt að byrjunni frá miðjum janúar fram í miðjan febrúar. Og þá erum við með skemmtidagskrá í háskólanum, hátíðin yfirleitt vel sótt, fáum til okkar fjölda gesta sem koma og njóta tónlistaratriða, fá að smakka kínverskan mat, fylgjast með drekadansi og sjá kínverska skrautskrift, svo eitthvað sé nefnt.
Kvikmyndasýningar eru þannig að við sýnum heimildarmyndir eða leiknamyndir. Það er tekið á ýmsum málefnum eins og bara pólitík eða matarmenningu eða heimspeki, hverju sem kemur við kínversku menningu.
Einnig stendur stofnunin fyrir fyrirlestrum. Þá fáum við til okkar fyrirlestra ýmist erlendis eða innlenda. Þessi fyrirlestrar eru haldnir yfir skólaárið og eru opnir öllum. Árlega höldum við ræðukeppni sem heitir Kínversku brúin. Þetta alþjóðleg ræðukeppni og hæfileikakeppni sem að nemendur spreyti sig í kínversku, sína hæfileika sína í söng og leik.
Stofnunin hefur alltaf tímið lagt sig fram við að eiga samstarf við ýmsa aðila í samfélaginu.
Well, I don't know if there's a good place to stop.
Með kynningu á kínverskri menningu og samskiptum landanna. Þar á meðal eru kínverskar sendiráðið á Íslandi, félag Kínverja á Íslandi, kínversk-íslenska viðskiptaráðið og kínversk-íslenska menningarfélagið. Hið síðastnefnda eitt elsta starfandi vináttufélag í Kína og það mikill heiður fyrir stofnunina.
So we enter. This is just a part of this documentary, and you can enter our website to see the rest. So I'm sure you are interested in. But in the end, because I guess I don't have much time left, just want to mention that, this is basically what we are doing, as you see here, and we are very proud to be a cultural bridge between Iceland and China. But I think in Arctic perspective, I think there are at least in 3 areas we could do some contribution. And one is, of course, to be a platform for scholars and just an ordinary discussion about matters connection with the Arctic issues. And we have been doing that a little bit, but we are looking very much forward for do that in a more often or in a more broader way. We would also like to have more of our students studying and going for studies in the Arctic issues. And our mother institute in Beijing, Hanban, they offer a scholarship for our students, and we are. I would personally like to promote more of our students to go for studies in Arctic studies in connection with China, and more relation between Iceland and Nordic countries and China in this area. And also we are a large network of institutes around the world, and including the Nordic institutes, they have a relation between themselves. And we had actually an annual meeting last month where representatives for Confucius Institute in other Nordic countries came to Iceland, and we had discussion about cooperation. And I would like to see more cooperation between the Confucius Institutes in the Nordic countries in Arctic-related matters. So I think there are a lot of areas we can do more work to promote this, of course, general cultural relation between Iceland and Nordic countries, and also in some Arctic matters. But I guess my time is almost up, so I will just finish for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Magnús Björnsson, for your wonderful video and insightful analysis. Okay. Oh, thank you, my colleagues. 3 minutes has been saved for your high efficiency and timekeeping. Then, from now on, it's the time of question. Any question?
Leivlund from the Conceptualizing Institute. I have a question for Geir Helgesen, and that about your proposal, which I found very interesting in many regards, about possibly extending the research cooperation to Korea and Japan. I can see many. You listed many interesting and convincing arguments in favor of that. But don't you think also, if you take from another angle, that there may be also trade-offs with regard to the depth that you can get in for the Nordic countries, seen from the Nordic countries' point of view, with regard to cooperation with China, because I think one of the advantages that we see of the emerging CNARC cooperation is that we both get to know and learn to know a lot of different institutions in China, and also that it's possible to focus and also hopefully also to dig deeper into the fabric of Chinese knowledge institutions, and that there may be just in a practical way a trade-off with regard to size and complexity. So it's just a possible argument in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. Of course, this is a possible disadvantage of expanding, but my concern is actually that although the Arctic is a very peaceful
part of the world, and we hope all that it will remain so. But small things can change, and the debate in Denmark particularly, when regards to Greenland and China, has shown that the media can develop some public opinion that is so strong that no political party can actually go against it. And if we, the nice, well-meaning Nordic institutions, are banding up with China, we could also be seen as apologists or mouthpieces for the Chinese government's position in a way, because our political power in our countries are not that great. But if we made it a regional to regional group with capitalist South Korea, capitalist Japan, both allied with the US, but discussing Arctic matters already, as you told me yesterday in Hawaii, we could kind of be a very, as I said, resource bank with a particular authority that could the press could only with great difficulties disregard us because we would not be spokespersons for one big power, big growing power, that the media. A Danish newspaper just called me 1 hour ago asking about China's expanding power in the world and how we should react to that. And my answer is we should welcome it, of course. But there is a strong urge in the media to kind of depict China as a new Soviet Union style power that we should be aware of and be careful to engage too close with. And I think that is a wrong perception, but we have to find a way to kind of deal with this press that I don't like very much, although it's supposed to be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Geir. Rasmus, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to say that I agree very much with what Geir says. I think this region-to-region approach is very important. And also, basically, the rest of the world has a very deep interest in Northeast Asian dialogue and integration. And if there's anything we from the Nordic countries can do to, in our little niche, to facilitate and further a Northeast Asian dialogue, I think it will be very, very beneficial. And that is also, why we in our initiative have emphasized that this is an Asian Nordic plus dialogue. I have myself lived in Japan and I frequently visit China. And I do believe it's very, very important to keep the regional focus on Northeast Asia. Because, of course, China is immensely interesting. The rise of China is what global politics is about today. But as my great idol, Joseph Nye at Harvard, usually says, the most important strategic triangle in the world today is Washington, Beijing, Tokyo. So, yes, agreeing very much with Geir, it is very important to look at the Northeast Asian region as a region, talk to it as a region, and, if possible, facilitate a dialogue within that region.
That's a gentleman. Oh, yeah. The next is the lady.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentations. Yes, following up a question about the comments on medias in Nordic countries. And these days we because I'm a journalist from a Chinese newspaper, and I do find lots of demoralization of China's image in these days. Whether you can call it is because of the different ideas or different approach to human rights issues or different regional Tibet, Xinjiang issues. But sometimes I just feel that it is just kind of picking up evils. I don't know whether it's a kind of ideological difference, or it's just criticizing China as a one of the popular approach for those medias. That's my question. I hope I can get an answer. Thank you.
Excuse me, your question?
Well, if I understood the question right, you pointed out the demonization of rising China and Nordic media, which Geir also alluded very much to. And I just want to say, I mean, history is a wonderful thing, and historical consciousness helps with many things. How many of you remember, I think the name of the film was Rising Sun. How many of you remember Rising Sun with Sean Connery? It's about 22, 24 years old. Mark is nodding his head. I mean, in this room, we are old enough to remember how Japan was viewed in the late 1980s and around 1990. I mean, back then, Japan was going to take over the world. And I think his name was Ezra Fogel, the Harvard professor, wrote the book Japan is Number One. And then what happens? The Japanese real estate bubble implodes catastrophically. And of course, today nobody is concerned about Japan. And personally, having lived in the region, having lived in Japan, I think it's a very useful exercise because we've been through this before. And if we can bring in historical consciousness, I mean, if we can remind people how we used to look at Japan 25 years ago, people will feel a lot more at ease with China. And of course, China is facing a real estate bubble, facing demographic issues. China's growth opportunity is, of course, 10 times that of Japan. So China will become the world's biggest economy. But if we bring in a historical perspective, I think there will be much more perspective in this dialogue, in this debate.
Can I add a little bit? I think my friend from Stockholm was also talking about ideology, and I believe that most grown-up people, not necessarily as old as I am, but people that have experienced the 80s, maybe 70s as well, have been trained in a world outlook where there is ideological differences. There are several, or at least two main ideologies that are competing, and very many people are missing that kind of two poles that are competing. It's difficult to understand a world where you don't have a very clear, visible enemy that you can use as a mirror to show how good you are yourself. And therefore, very many people in the media are waiting to make China ideologically our new great enemy, which I hope they will fail doing, and I hope that we can contribute in their failure. Thank you.
Sorry, Sally.
Hello. Is it working? Good. I'm Iselin Stenstad from the Fridtjof Nansen Institute, and my question is, I guess, for you, Hongyuan, and also for Guo, although I realize you presented at the previous session, because you both ended with the Chinese concepts. Guo, you mentioned He and Gan'en, like harmony and Thanksgiving, and Hongyuan, you mentioned Dongxi Heyi. I am wondering, could you please elaborate on how we in the Nordic countries are, how can we understand the Chinese concepts? Yeah, that's my question. Or what is sort of the contribution to this understanding? And in that regard, also Magnús Björnsson, seeing from your video, maybe you have some on-hand experience with translating this concept. So if you want to comment, that would be great too. Thank you.
Hongyuan. Okay.
Thank you. To follow the previous question about mass media and the China's image, and then about China's narratives and the international governance. Because, firstly, for the mass media and the Chinese image, because there are different issues, different areas. Firstly, it's about the narratives or voice rights for China in the international negotiation. And the second question is the second issue will be the Chinese image in international mass media. They are actually it's different questions. For the first one, it's narratives, how to increase Chinese narratives in the international governance. This is it will take quite a long time for China to learn to use global or international narratives in international negotiation, in international governance, because traditionally our Chinese is actually for culture there are so many differences from the Western countries. For Western countries, mass media we used to use the stories, taking different story, different cases to elaborate some arguments. But for China, we try to use many value judgments. That's like the reporter from China. We should to learn to use the stories, different stories to elaborate our narratives. We should learn, particularly there are so many differences for China and India in international reputation, international image. Why India's image, India's narratives is very high, much higher than China in international governance, because India can use the Western or the global tools to improve his narratives or improve his image. So it's time for China to learn something from India's. And also we lack just like the last session we have so many questions about the NGOs. Actually in international mass media there's so many voices, narratives from the NGOs and the think tanks. Actually there is so little voices from Chinese NGOs or Chinese think tanks in international mass media. So for Chinese side, we should develop our NGOs, our think tanks. When I come to Rio Plus 20 in 2012, there actually very little, maybe only one or two Chinese NGOs have his own sessions during the UN Rio Plus 20s. But even for very small countries like Bangladesh, they have many NGOs. There is a data between Shanghai and Singapore's NGO. For Shanghai, it's a very big, the number one city in China. We have only registered social organization or social committee. We have only 3,000. But for Singapore, this number is more than 200,000 social organizations in Singapore city. So it's a big gap between China and the Western countries NGOs, particularly for the NGOs can use the international narratives for Chinese images. So this many for how to unite the Western and East, because currently we have done quite a lot for worldwide, like the video, and because traditionally for Western countries to try to use the investment, use the market to solve the public goods.
But for Chinese side, we Chinese used to try to find the final solutions from his or her own soul, to find the balance, find the ease from his or her soul, not just from the outside physical needs. So this is quite different, but we can learn something from the Eastern cultures to solve some global crises like climate and Arctic governments. This and also for mass media's so-called demoralize China, I don't agree with this argument, because there is some different cases. Some is the same fact but a different value. But we can try to improve the mutual understanding between China and Western countries. But some are seeing the different mistaken of the fact. We should to do something to use the fact, not use the value judgments to criticize Western mass media. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
If I might comment a little bit on this. You are correct. It's actually what we are facing every day, how to promote Chinese culture and how to build this bridge between these different worlds. And because we are definitely facing, like you mentioned, like the question earlier was, we're definitely facing a lot of ignorance about China in the Western countries, unfortunately. But I think the best way is to do it through some kind of comparison between these cultures, and we try to do that in a way. Then in that way you be able to easier to understand the Eastern culture compared to your own. I think that's at least one way we try to do. But this is definitely something we are thinking about every day, how to improve this kind of way of understanding.
Sorry, one moment. Before.
So, Njord Vegge from Fridtjof Nansen Institute. I have a comment regarding the question from the Chinese journalist here. I'll try to provide two different kind of explanations to the question you raised. And first of all, I would say I don't think it's so much demonizing, but at least a very deep skepticism towards some aspects of this Chinese rise. I think one component is the fact that China is not a democracy, so it's a one-party system and no freedom of press, and we know how people that criticize the government are put to prison. That type of insight and knowledge makes people skeptical. Another dimension that's very different, but also have one or a part of the picture, is probably in the West we have an experience with powerful states that are rising and actually becoming more and more powerful, actually use the power. Obviously, we have Nazi Germany, but it has been repeated many, many times in history that when a state becomes more and more powerful, even though it might not look threatening at a certain point of time, it might happen in the future. And this is kind of like the process going on with China. It's rising and sort of like this historical experience from centuries before might threaten people a little bit, I think. So those two explanations is at least the two parts of the picture.
Thank you for my friend's comments. Yes, and talking about democracy, I think from our Chinese, at least in my personal opinion, it's a very much concept from Western countries. And you think a one-party system is very bad, but then probably you are very much support this one-polar world. Who can say the system from Western is the best in the world? And about this Norwegian media criticizing China, yes, let's say, because sometimes I really, look at those medias and because I care very much about those criticism. And Norwegian government want to have established a better relation with China, and also the economic entrepreneurs, Norwegian companies want to have a better relation with China as well. So I wonder why, what kind of group or people the Norwegian media represent. And I have yesterday I got a letter from a Norwegian friend, just a normal people. I quote here. He says that I have never seen Norwegian media write so much about China than they have been doing this to the other countries within the last months. And the agenda is to demonize China, it seems. Media does not like that the new Norwegian government wants a better relationship with China. So I just, sometimes I'm really confused about those kind of criticism. If those criticism, I think those kind of criticism is too simple for our researchers. Yeah, just kind of, if it shows on the tabloids or whatever. But if scholars, experts, so criticize the country in this way, I don't think it's constructive. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the four speakers for your contribution, and especially thanks to the three Nordic scholars. All of you are expert on Asia, so I think so you can play very important role like a bridge that narrow the gap between the understanding each other, Asia country and the Nordic country. For Asia, especially East Asia, we want to learn from the Europe, from the Nordic, to form a community. Several years ago, the Japanese premier, former premier, got the concept of the East Asia community, but very short time, as no longer mentioned. And also several years ago, there's the ASEAN plus 10, ASEAN plus 3. Now, I think that there's something behind that. I think there's a shift back to our question. And Rasmus, you introduced about your project about Asia and the Arctic. And there's several, during your introduction, you mentioned several, two. One is that the Chinese government use science as a tool or something like that. I think that if you, at the early stage of research, if you use that sentence, I think so no matter how new materials you got, that Chinese government always use something to reach some goal. So I think maybe at this early stage, maybe you should make a neutral one. Another thing about the globalization. You know that you just mentioned that the Arctic faced a globalization, but vice versa, that China have faced globalization for 3 decades. Like Nokia have this factory there, and the IKEA from the Sweden also factory there. I think it's a globalization. Not just, to my memory, some scholar mentioned that China have the 1/5 of the population. The company, the name of the company, I think the number of the company, there's many. I think there's some globalization that if we can stop, that's a change, globalization. You can stop this rising China to involve something. So I think the globalization will have the two facets. We have to deal with it. So the question is that, just as we mentioned that in Arctic issue, as an environment issue and bioecology issue, we should have criteria. We should have a norm, international law to protect that. No matter the company from China, Russia, from United States, if you not reach that criteria, you should not be going in. Not matter if you are China or not China, Chinese company. That's what I'm meaning. Thank you very much. My comments.
Sure. And thank you very much for your comments. First of all, to the question of science diplomacy. Well, our findings are early, but I think it's also important to remember that science diplomacy is nothing. It's nothing uniquely Chinese. I mean, there's a very long history of states using science for diplomatic reasons. I grew up as a child in Iceland. I'm Danish, but I was a child in Iceland. And I remember, for example, very much the cultural and educational efforts of both the United States and the Soviet Union in Iceland, which of course was very much a part of the Cold War. And going back even much further back in time, we continue seeing states using education, using culture, using science for diplomatic reasons. So I think that's a very general phenomenon.
And also the Chinese scientists carry their science and according to the IPY. That's a part of the work, not the diplomacy of Chinese. China's.
And there, of course, and following up on what Geir said about the Northeast Asian dialogue, that science is a great way of talking together. And we often see that when nations at other levels have difficulties talking together, then the scientific links are perhaps the last links to break. Talking about globalization, well, globalization is an unstoppable train, and of course the foreign investments in China for the last 30 years, the mirror image of them are the outflow of jobs from the traditional northern Western economies. We've just had European elections in Europe, which saw a great rise of populist parties. And my personal analysis is that rise is very much a response to globalization. So I'm sorry, I forgot if I don't know if I missed any of your points. Sure.
Just add one sentence that actually China is quite different from the Soviet Union because in the late 1970s, we actually, the global economic system is just like one ship created by United States and Western countries. In late 1970s, China just joined this ship. Actually, we are in the same ship or same boat with the Western country, with the US and the European country. We are in the same boat and we have to achieve the win-win outcome because same boat, and we try to achieve the win-win outcome because it's unimaginable that we are in the same and China can try to jump into another ship or jump out of this ship created by the Western countries. And also China benefited quite a lot from this ship, this international economic and trade system, from our GDP, our energy resource, our per capita income. Actually, China is benefited quite a lot in last 30 years. We really enjoy in the same boat with all the countries in the world. So it's quite different from the Soviet Union because Soviet Union is in a different ship, different boat with the United States because they are two totally different kinds of market, the planning market and the planning economy and the market economy. But for China, it's in the same boat with the US, with the European countries. We actually this structure will help we to continue to do win-win cooperation. Thank you.
Just a very short comment to you. Of course, you're right. No doubt about it, and nobody here doubt what you have said. But if the media depict the situation in a different way, of political reasons, ideological reasons, whatever, it's no matter what you think about China or what we think about China, the public will read the newspapers and believe in the newspapers. And that's my main argument why we should include South Korea and Japan in this forum, because it would make it very much stronger. Not because these two countries are more truthful, democratic, capitalist or whatever, but because we made it into a regional to regional cooperation. That would be a very, very good signal. Thank you.
Can I just add to that? Of course, in the Nordic countries, we are very appreciative of the China-Nordic Arctic Research Center in Shanghai. And following up on what Geir said, I mean, personally, I would encourage China to consider. I mean, we saw the presentations earlier today about everything that's going on in Shanghai, all the aspirations, the polar aspirations in Shanghai. Personally, I think it would be great to see Shanghai as a regional polar center.
Okay, thank you.
In March, I participated in a conference held in Jeju, Korea, that Japan and Korea and Chinese scholars gathering there discussed about the science and social science research about Arctic. That's the cooperation. This happened just in March. That's a cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If it's possible, maybe may I take 2 minutes to answer the question raised by that lady about the what do I think about the peace in my mind. I think it's a very good but profound question. If it may, maybe I can show my humble opinion from the historic perspective. If we recall the old powers in history, we can find one historical law. Most of them, including the UK and the United States currently, and including the Soviet Union and Japan and from Germany, they achieve their dominant power by military expanding. That's to see, military expanding contributed much to their rising. But on the contrary, the side effect is obvious of the side effect of this way, this road. Why? Because the military complex or military industrial complex was given during the expansion. And this monster not do good to their nation. On the contrary, they consume or exhaust the energy and resources of their nation. So we can see this historical law. And due to the military expansion and military forces, so military power, they rise quickly, but fall also sharply. So China wanted to avoid to break through this historic cycle. So we can maybe one event, I mean, not sure, maybe one example is proof to satisfy my theory. That we can see none of the, we can say that as we know, the top of the Chinese power pyramid, on the top of the Chinese power pyramid, we see none of them has the military background. That's to say, the seven standing member of the CPC political bureau, none of them has the military background or intelligence background, even judicial background. If you are a serviceman, a professional serviceman, you are not expected to be involved, integrated into the high leadership in China. So China wants to break this through, avoiding the new military complex to consume or exhaust the resources of our nation. So I think the so-called or the peaceful rising, peaceful development is not one slogan or not one catchword. It's the best in choice for China. Okay. Any question? Or okay. Oh, okay. It's time. I hate to close our comments. Okay. Thank you very much, our speakers, and also thanks again for my wonderful comments from our participants. Okay.